Hi everyone, today I'm presenting my work on topology-aware generative adversarial network for joint prediction of multiple brain graphs from a single brain graph. This work has been done at Basira Lab by myself, Ella Bessadok, and supervised by Dr. Mohamed Ali Mahjoub and Dr. Islam Rekik. Nowadays, brain graph or connectome constructed from medical modalities is an important tool to characterize the abnormal changes in the human brain. However, existing multimodal medical datasets usually have incomplete observations due to the high acquisition cost and processing time of multimodal scans. So there is a need for a brain graph synthesis solution. To address this issue, a recent brain graph synthesis work proposed a geometric deep learning framework for one target brain graph prediction from a source one, such as predicting a functional brain network from a structural brain network. However, it is not effective for jointly predicting multiple target brain graphs from a single one. For example, if we have two target graphs to predict, we need to train two distinct GDL models for each target domain. So the question we aim to answer in this work is how can we design a GDL framework for a multi-target brain graph prediction task where we train a single model for all target domains. Existing multimodal image synthesis studies are categorized into one-target and multi-target prediction approaches. In the first category, some studies make use of a single source data available to predict the target data, while some other studies used multiple source data for one target modality prediction. Since such frameworks are incapable for jointly predicting multiple target modalities using a single learning model, recent studies focused on multi-target prediction tasks such as Huang and co-authors, which proposed an adversarial autoencoder to predict 3-target MRI from a single T1 MRI scan. Another recent study also adopted a similar architecture for a computer vision task. However, these frameworks are designed for image synthesis, so they cannot be generalized to geometric data types such as brain graphs. Concerning the graph synthesis task, we have identified a single brain graph prediction work called HADA, which is an adversarial domain alignment framework proposed to predict a single target brain graph from a source one. Besides its ineffectiveness for multi-target prediction, as we mentioned before, it is not designed in an end-to-end framework. On the other hand, Su and co-authors proposed to sequentially generate subgraphs in order to generate the whole molecular graph. However, these graph synthesis works only learn the global graph structure like the number of nodes and edges weights and overlook the learning of the local graph structure like how central a node is in the graph. By overlooking the learning of the local topology, one cannot capture which ROIs would be most effective for early diagnosis of neurological disorders. To overcome all these limitations, we introduce MultiGraphGAN, where we first design a graph adversarial autoencoder with an end-to-end learning fashion, which is generic so it can be applicable for both one-target and multi-target prediction tasks. Second, we design a cluster-specific decoder which handles the mode collapse problem of GAN, where the decoder produces data that mimic a few modes of the target domain. Finally, we introduce a topology-aware adversarial loss function to preserve both global and local topological properties of the target graphs. Here I give an overview of the main steps of our proposed method. Let's start with the first step where we represent our multi-view brain graphs by a single graph population. Each subject is represented by one source brain graph and m target graphs, where each graph is encoded in a symmetric matrix whose elements measure the similarity between two brain regions. So we vectorize the off-diagonal upper triangular part of each matrix to create a feature vector. Next, we stack those features vertically to get a feature matrix F for each target domain T to predict. Next, we learn a sample similarity matrix S for each domain using multi-kernel manifold learning algorithm or MKML, which efficiently fits the statistical distribution of the data by learning multiple kernels. In that way, we are modeling the relationship between the subjects, which we represented by a set of graph population G, where nodes denote subjects represented by their brain features, and the edges represent the pairwise similarity between subjects. In the second step, we will learn the graph embeddings of the source population. Our MultiGraphGAN comprises an encoder E and a set of domain-specific decoders G regularized by a discriminator D. Our encoder E is a graph convolutional network GCN taking as inputs the feature matrix and the learned sample similarity matrix and producing the embeddings of the source graphs encoded in the Z matrix. However, in practice, such GAN generators do not handle the heterogeneity of the input data distribution. To solve this problem, we propose to first cluster the source graph embeddings Z into homogeneous clusters using MKML. To decode the resulting clustered embeddings, we propose in the next and final step a set of cluster-specific generators. Basically, instead of assigning a single generator for a target domain, we build C generators where each produces a graph approximating the target data distribution of a specific cluster. So for example, here we have the ping generator aiming to produce the graphs in the target domain 1 of the samples belonging to the ping cluster, and this one generates the target graphs in the domain M of the same ping cluster. All of the predicted target graphs are optimized using the discriminator D, defined as a GCN model, which has a loss function composed by 3 terms computed for each of the C cluster-specific generators. The first one is the adversarial loss, the second one is the graph domain classification loss, and the last term is the gradient penalty. After computing these 3 terms, we compute the final loss of the discriminator, which sum up the loss terms of the C clusters and add 2 hyperparameters to control the relative importance of these terms. For the generator loss function, we also include 3 loss terms in addition to the original adversarial loss. The first one is our proposed topological loss, the second one is a graph reconstruction loss, and the last one is the information maximization loss. Similar to the discriminator loss, we add 3 hyperparameters that need to be tuned and we sum over the C clusters. That was the 2 loss functions we used to train our MultiGraphGAN. In our experiments, we used a set of 310 structural T1 weighted MRI data extracted from the EBI dataset. Each subject has 6 morphological brain graphs, or MBG, with 3 graphs for each hemisphere. We consider the maximum principal curvature of the left hemisphere as the source graph to predict the 5 target graphs. For evaluation, we trained our model on 19% of the dataset and tested on 10%. And we also used grid search to determine the best parameters for MKML and our graph autoencoder. We compared our MultiGraphGAN against 2 baseline methods and its 3 updated versions. The first baseline method has the same architecture of MWGAN, but we neither included the clustering step nor our proposed topological loss function. The second one is a variant of the first method where we add the MKML clustering of the source graph embeddings. And the 3 updated versions are mainly our MultiGraphGAN models learned using 3 different centrality measures: closeness, betweenness, and eigenvector centralities. We report for each of these 5 methods the Pearson correlation coefficient between the ground truth and the predicted graphs, and the mean absolute error between the ground truth centrality scores and the predicted ones. We can see that with both evaluation metrics, our MultiGraphGAN framework outperformed the comparison methods. In this work, we introduced the first geometric deep learning framework with an end-to-end learning manner for multi-target brain graph synthesis from a source graph. Our MultiGraphGAN has 2 main strengths: the clustering of the learned source graph embeddings, then training a set of cluster-specific generators which synergetically predict the target brain graphs, and the topological loss function including a centrality measure which enforces the generators to preserve local and global topology of the original target graphs. Our MultiGraphGAN showed that eigenvector centrality and betweenness centrality have much impact on identifying the most influential node rather than closeness centrality. We aim in the future to extend our framework to predict multi-target time-dependent brain graphs, and we will evaluate it using a larger dataset including functional and structural brain graphs. If you want to know more about our work in detail, please check our 20 minutes long video on our Basira YouTube channel and our code on GitHub. And thank you for your attention.